I'm Steve Wood, recovered alcoholic. Welcome to Big Book Compendium. Hope you're having a great Monday, some mornings, some evenings. The thing is page 63, we did the third step prayer. And I always ask people, do we take a break? Do we go home and start making dinner and all that stuff? No, we want to start working on at least write a few things down in our fourth step. And the reason that I say that is because now we're on this course of action, and it says next on bottom of 64. That's where we're at. Sorry, bottom of 63, very bottom of the page, 63. And it's the word next, which is a very powerful word. And because it's means now. I just like to cut to the chase. It means now. And now means immediately following. If you're in in line or wait at the doctor waiting to be called upon, sometimes they say next. Well, that means you get up there and go. You just don't sit there. In other words, no rest, no breaks, pen to paper. And this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where the program truly begins. This is where it separates the men from the boys. And it says next be launched on a course of vigorous action. So let's get the word launch. That means propel forward with great force. It's like a rocket ship. He uses the word rockets, a fourth dimension. He also says launch into a fourth dimension. So he uses these powerful words. Launch is an extremely powerful word. It's not a car driving 10 miles an hour. We launched on a course, and vigorous means energetic action, sometimes forceful. And think about vigorous action would be if you couldn't find your bottle of booze in your house or your bag of dope, right? You didn't go, oh, well, it's not around here anywhere. No, you're tearing apart the house, tipping over furniture, yelling at people. Where is it, right? That's vigorous action. The first step is a personal house cleaning, which many of us have never attempted. It's interesting because I thought the first step was step one. But it still is, but we're way past that. We're in a different realm. I used to do this thing on the board where you break down, you go steps 1, 2, and 3, 4 through 9, 10, 11, 12 in different brackets. And I would explain that second bracket is the beginning of the first step of the action, right? Like it says later on for step 1, we made a good beginning. So we're way past step 1, the real step 1. And we're on a course of vigorous action, which is a house cleaning, 4 through 9. I think of the word house cleaning, I think of this. I never forget, a friend of mine, called me, and his grandmother had passed away. And she had this huge mansion up in the hills, not far from where I lived. And they wanted to sell it, but they couldn't sell it because they had to go through it. So he asked me, he goes, hey man, can you come up to the house and help me go through some stuff? And I had no idea what I was getting myself into. The house looked gorgeous outside, a couple tall grass and weeds, but inside it looked like the show Hoarders. I mean, there was packs of stuff to the ceiling. There was a trail, like the hallway was trails like this big, and some of the stuff was so heavy it sunk into and down to the bottom of the foundation of the house. So it's packed with stuff from 40 or 50 years, and we had no idea what we're going to find in there. We found some valuables and all stuff like that. But my point is we had to go through it piece by piece slowly. We just didn't take a dumpster and start throwing stuff in there. Anything that was broken or junk, we threw away. And we kept stuff that worked or had value. And that's what we're doing here, except this is a little deeper than going through someone's house. It's going through our personal history. We're talking dark tunnels and stuff like that, and for that, we need this miracle type of soul surgery that we call personal inventory. A lot of people fear this, and you don't have to, because it's just like the books. And here's why they fear it. Just like the book says, many of us have never attempted. We've never done anything like this before. We're not people that just held on to a few things emotionally. We held on to a ton of stuff, and the beauty of step 4 and 5 sometimes happens in 5. your sponsor will point something out and it opens up a whole can of more stuff. Or you have it, you do your hour and 6 and 7 and all that, and you're driving home and all of a sudden you remember more stuff because your mind's clear. That's sort of, you say, man, this is a crazy journey, but it's, and it's the same thing. We held on to stuff that was broken and damaged, and we're not, like I said, we're not talking about antiques and dollars. We're talking about resentments, fear, guilt, sex conduct, all that stuff, harms. Like I said, step 4 scares people because it's a journey of the unknown. But it's not really a journey of the unknown. People aren't afraid of the unknown. They're afraid of the known. They're afraid of of what they know inside them, what they know is there. There's a reason why they don't want to go back to their childhood. But we must know that we're holding on to, because we know we're holding on to because we protect it. And that's the thing. We fought hard and long to protect it, many years, and so much that we pushed people out of our lives. We hurt people to protect it. How many resentments and harms as you have, or fears were built on protecting this, your old resentments or your old harms? There's a part I have my sponsees write in fear, and we'll see when we get there, is fear of what others might know about me. I tell them to write those out because I can go any which direction. But the thing is we heard of this protected. I mean, how am I, we say, oh, how am I selfish? I'm not wrong. I didn't do anything. Look at what they did. I don't have any resentments, they say. My favorite one is, the only person I ever harmed is myself. And then the big thing, what automatically happens with resentments is, our biggest thing is we automatically blame other people. It's all their fault. This is, I'm going to say, my personal conviction that no real alcoholic or real addict can ever achieve a life of real purpose and attain any sanity, overcome the obsession, have true permanent sobriety, until they take the action away as broken down in this book. It's the key ingredient to having a new vital spiritual life. And here's the truth. We believe suffering is holding on to us, but here's the reality. We are holding on to the suffering. It's not holding on to us. We are holding on to it. It's not flies, it's not locusts. It's we are the one holding on to it. A few weeks back, we read about self-centeredness was the root of our troubles. That means I am the root of my troubles. And what some people have said in book studies, well, if I'm the root of my troubles, then we can work on it and fix it. No, if I'm the root of my troubles, I cannot fix it. I need something. I need a plan of action. I need a guide. I can't fix it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. So when we let suffering go, the thing we see is that no one else was ever responsible for my suffering except for me. And that is the beginning of a new understanding. And that new understanding is not achieved by studying it, going to book studies like this, reading, going to groups, meetings, therapy. It's getting a new understanding it takes an open heart. And that's why the truth sets us free. And that's the power of 4 through 9. Let's go to top of page 64. So we read this before last week, and I just do it again because now it's on the other side of step 3, going into step 4. And it's reminding us something here. This is a 3rd step warning. Though our decision, step 3, was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort at step 4, to face step 5 and be rid of step 6, the things in ourselves which have been blocking us. Blocking us from what? Blocking us from God. Not out here, within ourselves. That stuff we held on to, that stuff we protected, deep-seated resentment. We protected some ugly stuff. We held on to some ugly stuff. We've been mad at people for years. We call them enemies. We held on to fears that dictate our future, fears that are way past their expiration date. We've held on to guilt. Things happened 20 years ago. The other person completely doesn't remember anymore. They moved on with their lives years ago. But for us, it's still eating us up inside and bothering us. We don't feel that stuff until we put down alcohol. All of us are dry when we walk into the rooms. And that's why I always say I got to have empathy for the guy that walked in the room, because I walked in the room the same way. And it breaks my heart when someone's got 6 months and they're still dry. And now I got a sponsor, picked up the steps, because how could you live with that pain? Because our anesthetic is gone, our medication is gone. We put it away. So we store this stuff where? We have a temple inside of us. We call it the great reality. And that's where we connect to the spirit of God, whatever you want to call it. And we store this stuff inside that temple, deep down within us. A temple that is the most sacred, beautiful place you've ever gone to. But we store the worst stuff inside there. Does that make sense? You're starting to see what 439 do. It's about removing stuff. So we need a strenuous effort, something that can go to the dark, ugliest caves that are inside of us. We think they're ugly, but they're actually beautiful. So we can see the driving forces of the stuff we hold on to. We can face the stuff in 5, and we can let them go in 6 and 7. So that stuff no longer blocks us. Now do you see why the steps are not about gaining anything? They're about losing stuff so we can be closer to what we call, or what you want to call, God within, or whatever you call it, spirit, your own conception. Look what it says next. And this is some deep stuff, very deep stuff. I'm opening my files. It says, our liquor is but a symptom. We had to get down to causes and conditions. So a symptom is an indicator to a disease or some disorder. We know the cause is just the origin of something, and the condition is a state of something in, maybe regard to its appearance, quality, and working order. The condition lets something in, right? Let me explain the symptom really quick more. So if I'm coughing and sneezing and my nose running, it's a symptom of a cold. Now you cannot see the cold, only the symptoms, right? And you cannot get rid of the symptom of that, which is a cold, without getting rid of the cause of it. And if you do not eliminate the cause, the symptom will continue to reappear in any state or form. Alcohol is a symptom. So if I don't get rid of the cause, the symptom is always going to reappear. I mean, look at Western medicine, right? We treat, most of the world doesn't now, we treat the symptom, right? You get a cold and they give you Sudafed and all this stuff so you don't have a stuffy nose and your eyes don't burn, your headache goes away. And Eastern medicine, they give you stuff when you're not even sick to prevent the cause from ever happening. If you eliminate the cause, the symptom will always go away. So I'm going to look at it from our first step aspect. On step 1, the cause is allergy obsession and our conditions on manageability. But now we're going to go deeper. I'm going to put up the slide. So the symptom, alcohol is just a symptom. And we mentioned this several times before. The cause is misdirected instincts. Misdirected instincts, the pride, the self-esteem. Misdirected, misuse of it might even be a better word. Misusing it, using it to my own advantage, unknowingly. And when I live on misdirected instincts, it puts me in the condition of harboring resentment, living in guilt, full of fear, full of fright from reality, restless, irritable, and discontent. That's high anxiety, easily pissed off, and that's satisfied, all wrapped together, right? Misery, depression, selfishness, self-seeking, that's harming others. Dishonest, that's harming others. This conditions right here is also known as untreated alcoholism. This is the stuff you carry in the Alcoholics Anonymous when you walk in the doors, even if you don't know it or not. And like right now, I'm doing this, I'm I want to call it a diet. It's super healthy eating, and I'm doing a 10-day kind of cleanse. And my point is that when I start is for 2 days, I felt like crap. And 3 days, I felt like crap. And the guy goes, oh, don't worry, your symptoms go away. And they did. But people tell us that in the program. Oh, don't worry, you come in here angry, it's gonna go away. On its own, that's what they want to tell us, right? You have to eliminate the cause, or at least become aware of the cause, and these symptoms go away. The old stuff, these are all old ideas from the past. But these, we'll still harbor resentment sometime, but we can go right to step 10. We'll still have guilt sometimes, but not as deep, not compared to the stuff we did in the past. I don't think we'll be full fight from reality for doing the steps. We won't be full of fear. We'll have fear sometime. We will get restless, irritable, and discontent, but we were aware of it. That's where you want to be. I'm going to take it a little deeper and go to page 47 of the 12 and 12. And it says, we thought conditions drove us to drink. Conditions, this stuff. And when we tried to correct these conditions, we tried to correct them, we tried to be a better person and all that, we found we could not to our entire satisfaction. Our drinking went out of hand and we became alcoholics. It never occurred to us that we needed to change ourselves to meet these conditions, whatever they were, change ourselves. And then I start seeing in 6 and 7, they just kind of go, there's no depth and weight behind them anymore once we're aware. Once we're aware. So how do we do that? How do we meet these conditions, get better? Let's go to 64. It says, therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. This is important stuff here. Taking a commercial inventory or any inventory is a fact-finding, fact-facing process. It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock and trade. One object is to close damaged or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. There's a condition right there. Promptly, without regret. Get rid of them. Without regret is the condition. That's what that's what we need 4 and 5 to get there. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. So, I'm sure people in here have done commercial inventory before. It's, your boss tells you about a few days ahead of time. All of a sudden you don't go, oh, awesome. No one wants to do it. No one wants to do it. But why do we do it? It's to find out what is selling and what's not selling. Like, I'm going to use the aspect of a grocery store. And so if Stephen worked in the grocery store with me and I'm the boss, I'm the one in charge. And I tell him, I say, Stephen, here is an inventory list, has all our items on there, and it tells you how much we got. Beer, 20 cases, string beans cans, 20 cases, whatever, all through it, right? Everything in the store. He's going to go to the store and he's going to write down, he's going to go to the beer where the 20 cases are, and he's going to write down how many are left on the shelf. For everything, he's going to do that versus what we brought into the store. And then he's going to take it back to me and he's going to discuss it. Sound familiar? And I'm going to look at it with him and I'm going to say, so what do you want to do with that beer? There's still 20 cases on the shelf. He's going to go, we need to remove it. All the ones that aren't selling. So after we're done, he's going to go remove it all. Sound familiar? So let's compare these inventories a little bit. The first one, we're going to do inventory comparisons of business and personal. So we're going to see they're almost the same. Fact finding is, if anything that's fact finding is searching, just like ours. So ours is really a fact finding process. Fact facing, it's the same as fearless, right? So ours is a fact finding process. The truth, moral, pretty much the same thing, right? So we see so far, they're very similar. And step 4 says, made a searching for fearless, more inventory of ourselves. Like I said, searching is fact finding and fearless is fact facing. Moral is a deep word because it's relating to right or wrongs in our human character, right? You know, we've heard the saying, you know, the moral to, if you tell a story, what's the moral to the story? When a story has a moral to it, it's supposed to teach us how to be a better person. Same thing here. Personal moral inventory is the examination of personal resentments, harms, fears, sex conduct in order to become aware of what drives those behaviors. So here's another, with those, some of those definitions in there, you know, I'm looking at moral. I'm going to take the fact finding, fact facing, and just look at moral as honesty, which is what it is. So you look at it this way, another way to look at it, made a fact finding, fact facing, honest inventory of ourselves. It kind of opens it up a little bit that way. Let's look at the object of both inventories. Again, this one's even more similar, right? They are both to disclose, to disclose of, rid of, right? Damaged or unsaleable goods. Does this sound familiar? And most of all, to get rid of them promptly without regret. Now, for us, this is deep right here, because I'm not going to know what parts of me are damaged or unsaleable goods unless I'm doing 4 and 5. And I'm not going to get rid of them promptly with the condition without regret unless I've done 4 and 5, because this is 6. This, you know, the other object of it is the stock and trade, right? They're trying to get rid of stock trade that is damaged or unsaleable. Our object of inventory is resentments, fear, and harms. But you see the big difference. Their object is to get rid of stock and trade. You know, ours is to get rid of, let go of resentments, harms, and fears. Try that on your own. Try that without inventory, because we jump right to that. We jump right to that. I remember, I know people have done confession before and try to let go of that before they do it. It doesn't work that way. So step 4 helps us. What it does is it helps us reveal our damaged and unsaleable goods so we can get rid of them properly without regret. You know, and when you clear out or eliminate something you don't want, you rid yourself of it. That's the thing. And rid means to remove, eliminate, displace, eradicate. And it's very deep words. And step 4 is the beginning process of removing stuff, freeing ourselves from something that is no longer works for us. And let's go back to the book. And they're going to talk a little bit, you know, we did the same thing with our lives, comparing it to business inventory. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup, which cause our failure, right? Being convinced that self, that's the misdirected misuse of instincts, manifested in various ways, was what had defeated us. We considered its common manifestations. So manifestations are signs, right? What are your common manifestations? Look at your one. What were your common signs? What was your aura that you put out in the past? What's your aura you put out now? We talked in a group last night about ego versus the watchman, and the watchman is what we see out here and how it's different now, because now we're spiritually watching stuff. Resentment is the number 1 offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. I mean, doesn't alcohol destroy more alcoholics than anything else? It doesn't make sense. I mean, I thought heroin destroyed more addicts than anything else. You know, addiction killed more addicts than, you know, drugs did. I mean, that's what they tell us at meetings, right? I mean, that's the focal point in all these groups we go to. I mean, not these groups here, but I mean, a lot of the groups in person and a lot of the ones we go to. The focal point is the darkness. You know, it's not, you know, it's not, you know, here's the thing we have to realize is resentment is a very complex emotion. very complex. And the reason it's so complex is because it lives within us. It's always there. It was always there. And it's a reoccurring emotion from the past. You know, it's the displeasure towards something or somebody, maybe even an object, right? Strong, bitter anger that we held on to, or we believe we were treated unfairly a lot, right? And the reason it keeps coming back and never goes away is because the only reason why, because we held on to it. We choose to hold on to it. The difference between me now and me in the past would be if someone came at me and made me mad. It would, you know, they made me mad. They pissed me off, right? And I would think about it all the time, and I would hold on to it, and I saw them again, I was mad. The difference today is I realize the only person that can make me mad is me. You can't make me mad. And when I have a resentment, I write it down and look at it and I let it go. I make amends if I have to sometimes. And then the person comes at me again, it's diffused. It's not this big giant balloon. It's diffused a little bit. I might still get a resentment again, but it's not going to be the same. And, you know, resentment, a little background, comes from the French word that's called ressentiment, and or resentment, if you want to put it more towards, you know, English, which is a combination of word which means again, and sentiment, which means to feel anger, right? To feel hurt or threat, to re-feel over and over again. And that's exactly, you know, what we did with anger. We held on to it and we felt it over and over again. And we pack it away for the next day, the next decade, the next 3 decades sometimes. I mean, think about it. What was the longest, what was the most, how many decades did you hold on some of your resentments? Some go back 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, longer. I had a guy the other day who's amazing book thumper guy. And he wanted to know how I do inventory. We went through a little, it's not that mine's different from anyone else's, but he remembered at the end, he called me up. He goes, man, I just remembered a harm that I did, or a resentment that I had from 40 years ago against somebody. And I go, really? I go, do you remember it? And he goes, no, but the reason I had it was because I resented it's what connected to the big resentment I had. It was like, wow. See, the reason I bring that up is because we always find stuff. It's about removing stuff. And, you know, I'll give you a good example of removing stuff. So yours, in why it's complex, why resentments are complex is, you know, I used to work for a tree stump removal service. And so when people cut down trees, we would come in and take the stump out. And it was a big tree. We would, you know, create like a circle around it, and we'd pull and pull with our own muscle. And most of the time we couldn't move it. So we had to tie a rope on that, tie it to my truck, and hit the gas. And when that didn't budge, we had to go deeper, right? We had to take like this auger, it's like a big drill, and drill into the ground, dig deep, and remove everything that's around the root. Just dig it all out. And what was holding it down to the ground underneath? Well, we couldn't see. It might be a root from another tree or a pipe under the ground. Sometimes the tree would go like another tree straight down to the ground. It was weird, you know, and sometimes, you know, so when removing a tree, you cannot be, you know, stuff cannot be seen. You have to dig, remove all its components, every little piece that's holding it down. The moral of that story is removing resentments is the same way. You got to dig, go deep, remove all its components. And that's why I'm so big on instincts. That's its components. Selfishness that's part of its components. It's not a confession because there's no components involved. If I just say, you know, I resent Stephen because he kicked my dog, right? Okay, that's a confession. But if I say I kicked my dog, well, that affected my self-esteem, my pride, now I'm looking at its components, right? Before we move on, I want to go to page 66 so we can talk a little bit deeper about resentments. Okay. Where it says it is plain. It is plain that a life which includes deep resentment only leads to futility and unhappiness. Futility means, I guess the best way to say it is no matter how much we work at it, nothing good happens. That's in our own mind. What's the point? Why try? That type of stuff. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile? How many hours do we waste on resentment? Trying to figure out what happened, thinking about it, can't sleep at night. People do it all the time. And I'll break it down a bit more. Most people can get away with it, right? Most people can get away with it. And we'll get back into that in a minute, why most people can get away with it. But with the alcoholic who's this is the hope of the real alcoholic. But the alcoholic whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. We, the first 100, found it as fatal. So the first 100 found it as fatal. They're saying fatal as in death. When they say fatal, they're talking about the cycle of drinking, like drinking poison, like a toxic, like a cobra bite, is what there's when they say fatal. When you something happens to you and you immediately fear, or like drowning, almost like you start to fear death. But when harboring such feelings, first of all, what does a harbor do? It stores. I go out to San Francisco a lot, and if I go out there at night, I'm always amazed how many boats are in the harbor. Thousands and thousands, or in the wintertime, thousands and thousands of them, right? Hundreds of boats stored there. Think about harboring feelings. I like to compare. We harbored way more than that. For us, it means to hold on to negative emotions rather than dispel them. For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of spirit. We talked about that earlier. Where's the sun? What's the sunlight of spirit? That's God within. We shut ourselves off on that, right? Because where do we store it? Within, the same place. The insanity of alcohol returns, the obsession returns, and we drink again. For us, a drink is a die. Now they're talking about physical. They're not talking about physical death again. They're talking about going back to that cycle. And what's interesting for, the obsession returns. I have seen this happen before where I got a picture on my wall of my best friend when I walked in recovery, and we both knew each other. We're sober 22 years ago. And I buried him, 4 years ago now. With 8 years of sobriety, he disappeared. And I saw it coming from a mile away. He stopped doing step 10. He got in a relationship and refused to make amends when that relationship ended. And the next thing you know, he was taking oxycodone, drinking, and it was it was like he had a nice house out here. The next thing you know, he's all alone. He's bringing homeless people to live there. I knew he was going to lose it all. And the next thing you know, he's out on the streets, and he died all alone. This guy would have had a funeral. They would have had 400 people there because he was that well known in AA. I went to his funeral and spoke. There was 6 people there because he shut themselves off from the sunlight of spirit when he stopped doing inventory. Well, it says, whereas a drink is a die. Well, I want to live. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. Remember what step 10 says. We cease fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. That's someone who's free of anger. It's a condition of being recovered. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. Live means not breathing and having a long life. Lives means living within where we're supposed to live, within love. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. We all know what a grouch is. It's that person who's always complaining. They're always miserable and unhappy. Maybe they're unsociable, extra critical, they're irritable, right? They got, their temper, rude, negative, always negative on things, and they only focus on the faults, and brainstorm means to solve or investigate an issue intensely in our head, thinking about it, like planning out. I'm going to brainstorm. Some people call that the committee, right? So we intensely thinking and dissecting using one of our most powerful tools, the brain, with it, but with the mind that is unhappy, the grouch. I don't recommend that, because anything in life is just going to come out through the anger. It's kind of like the obsession. Here's why. There may be dubious luxury for normal men. Okay. Remember I said people can get away with it, right? People can get away with it. And that's the truth. People can get away with it. And with the real alcoholic, remember what our hope is, to me, is the growth of a spiritual experience. And the thing is the normal man is the one who doesn't have the allergy, no obsession. They can spend their whole life being a jerk. They can spend their whole life brainstorming with an angry mind. And because they're not going to drink, they'll take the edge off, but they're not going to take off and go on a run. We are the same way up to the point of drinking. That's why we're doing this, because we're going to fuel ourselves with resentment, and then we're going to fuel ourselves with alcohol, right? We can only be a jerk for so long. We can only stay miserable for so long until we seek that ease and comfort, like anyone else does. So let's say Stephen and I go out and have a drink at a bar. He's a real alcoholic. I'm not. Right. And we're both there for the same reason, to take the edge off a bad day. And I tell you, I'm going to have 3 beers tonight. He has no idea how many he's going to have. He can't. I'm going to have 3 beers and go, I got to go home. I go home. He's still there on, the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, 6th. The next thing you know, he goes in the blackout and he wakes up in some other, country or whatever, on that run. That they may be dubious luxury for normal men, but for alcoholics, these things, resentments, are poison. And people often associate that quote with resentments like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. People say it's a Buddha quote, but it's not a Buddha quote. It was derivative actually from one of our AA books, unofficial AA books. I call it Sermon on the Mount by Emmett Fox. It's one they read really early on. And I have a quote from that book, Sermon on the Mount. This is where drinking poison, wait for the person to die, came from. This is what Emmett Fox says. And this is kind of deep. You might as well swallow, it's talking about having resentment. You might as well swallow a dose of prussic acid in 2 gulps, and then think to protect yourself by saying, this one's for the Rhapsodier and this one is for the Bristol murderer. Talking about 2 people he resents. You will hardly have any doubt as who's receiving the benefit of the poison. That's where it came from. But Buddha did say, anger will never disappear so long as thoughts of resentment are cherished in the mind. He also said those who are free of resentments, anger, their thoughts will be peace. Latu's from the Tao. I love what he says about resentments. When we let go of what I am, I become what I might be, or maybe who I've always been. Someone in our group said last night when we were talking about change, consciousness. When we find consciousness, we become who we were all along. We just had no idea. The thing is I don't care who you are, how cool you are, or how successful you believe you are. All of us at time have had deep-seated, ugly anger we hold on to. And resentment does nothing to change the person we resent. It never resolves the conflict. And instead of freeing us from the wrongs of others, resentment allows others to dominate us, occupy our minds. I guess what I'm saying is there's 0 nutritional value with the resentment. So resentment does not define the other person, only defines us. It causes our pain. And when we ease that pain by harming another person, all that does is create guilt, meaning the pain comes back on us and we are the ones left. But at least when we get guilt, we know who's to blame. Us, right? And here's the one thing is, if you go out your house today and you stub your toe on a rock, you know, do you think about that rock for 4 months and plot revenge? Or hunt down the other rocks, or take a hammer to all the other rocks and smash them all? No. If you stub your toe on a rock, you administer first aid. That's what we must do with resentment. And 439 is our first aid. We're bleeding when we come in here, except we don't see the blood. That's why people don't want to do 439. They don't see the blood, right? But if we're bleeding, we administer first aid. That's what we need to do here. We don't have to be at the control of another anymore. We can have that freedom. I'm going to read a quote by Dale Carnegie. And this is a beautiful quote. If anyone wants this copy, I'll put up on our group today. It's called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. Listen to this quote. There's a little bit of a paragraph, actually. When we hate our enemies, we give them power over us, power over our sleep, our appetites, and our happiness. They would dance for joy if they knew how much they were upsetting us. Our hate doesn't harm them at all, but turns our days and nights into hellish turmoil. No matter how much harm we feel has been done to us, how much we feel our anger is justified, our job now is to take the eyes off the microscope and pick up the mirror. We need to be responsible for our own actions and reactions. We have to stop power over anyone else's actions or emotions, nor do we want to live rent-free in another's head. Lord knows we've worked to do that on ourselves without muddling. I'm sorry, let me read it again. Lord knows we have enough work on that to do than muddle our waters in another person's behavior. Back to 64. Resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. I think we see now why it destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stems all forms of spiritual disease. For we've not only been mentally and physically ill, we've been spiritually sick. I mean, people blame the spiritual disease on sin and lack of faith, lack of worship. And they're saying it's much deeper than that. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. Look at what they just said there. When the spiritual malady is overcome, the obsession gets removed. The obsession gets removed. What a promise. What a beautiful promise. So we come into Alcoholics Anonymous. And even when I knew about the obsession, I did not know I'd be working on my spiritual malady or my spiritual nature to get the obsession removed. I thought it was something we had to do. I had no idea. I didn't come to Alcoholics Anonymous to face a spiritual malady. So the question is, what is spiritual sickness? What is a spiritual malady? To answer that question, I'm going to put up a slide. And it's going to have 7 questions on it that I'm going to answer. And these questions have grown over the years. First it was 4, then it was 5. Every time I do a book study, a little more goes into it. So the first question is, what is a spiritual malady? What are the manifestations of the spiritual malady, the signs? What's the cause of those manifestations? What is the end result of the spiritual malady? If left untreated, can the spiritual malady drive us back to drink? What's the remedy for it? And what happens in the result of that remedy? So let's look at the first one. What is a spiritual malady? What is a spiritual malady? The spiritual malady is the inability to connect to that power within me. Higher power, self, God, whatever, higher self, God, whatever you want to call it. Spirit. That spirit within you, that power within you. Remember what it said in this book, what the actor does? He shoves all this crap far inside himself. And I mentioned this already, 55 perfectly states, we found the great reality deep down within us. And the last analysis is only there it may be found, is so with us. The inner guidance center is where we receive strength, inspiration, guidance, and direction. If I'm shoving negative emotions inside myself, it creates the inability to connect to that spirit within, shutting ourselves off from the sunlight of spirit, like I just said. I don't receive the guidance, inspiration, and direction we desperately need. You might have a belief in God, a very strong religious knowledge or spiritual knowledge, or know about Buddhism and all these great spiritual understandings, and are a kind person. If you cannot connect to the spiritual within you, that's a spiritual malady. Some call it untreated alcoholism, some call it sickness. So what's the manifestations, the signs? So we have 5 common manifestations: resentments, harms to others, guilt, fear, sex misconduct. Resentments, harms done to others, guilt, fear, sex misconduct. It's in those manifestations that show to us we are running on self. It's those manifestations that you hold, that we hold on to. And there's a focal point of step 4. Those manifestations block us from God creating that malady. So what causes this? You're probably going to know exactly what I'm going to say. What causes those manifestations? Instincts, misdirected instincts, self-harm, riot. If we continue to be driven by misdirected instincts, we will always continue to experience those manifestations, right? And what happens is we follow those instincts rather than that intuition, that God within. You can't have 2 cores at the same time. I heard one guy say one time, the difference between God's word and the voice, our spirituality talking to us, the instincts talking to us, is like the instincts is like 1,000 words being yelled at us at once, and God is like one. And we always hear that God word inside somewhere, but gets drowned out. And that's the thing. We follow those instincts. If misdirected instincts create the common manifestations, does that mean misdirected instincts create the spirituality? Of course. What is the end result of the spiritual malady? And this one's really deep. And it creates this illusion, this untruth that we're separated from God. So illusions of false perception of reality, a misleading falsehood. And what's a falsehood? A lie. The lie is we're separated from God. So it's an illusion, because how can you be separated? People always say this at meetings. Oh, I've been separated from God again. Well, it's an illusion, because how can you be separated from what's been within you since the day we were born? Every single one of us is a spirit within us that guides and directs us. It's always been there. When one believes they're separated, they say things like, why would a loving God not take away my pain? Why would why would God take away my loved ones? Give me financial hardships. Isn't he supposed to be all loving? He doesn't answer my prayers, all that stuff. In other words, it creates doubt. We've never been separated. We've only been blocked. And the difference between separated is you can never get to something that's separated. When you get to something blocked, there's walls to be knocked down, things to be removed. Carl Jung said in the book Modern Man in Search of His Soul that man fills the separation with the spirit of alcohol, fills that area with alcohol. If left untreated, can the spiritual malady drive me back to drink? If we continue to experience those 5 manifestations, eventually our mind will seek out the sense of ease and comfort that comes at once by taking a few drinks. That's what we do. And what is that remedy? What is the remedy for the spiritual malady? This is top secret. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Thank God we have that. Thank God, because I don't know anywhere else that can do this as quick, as powerful. Rocketed to another dimension, rocketed 4 through 9, right? 49 is step 4 is the beginning of the treatment of our spiritual sickness. And what happens as a result of that malady? When that malady is overcome, like we just said, we strengthen mentally and physically. Meaning, because of 49 and taking on resentments on paper and all the other stuff, the obsession gets removed. By looking at the kind of manifestations on paper and seeing that instincts create them and drive them, the obsession at some point goes. Interesting. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we strengthen mentally and physically. I'm going to blow through these real quick again. What is the spiritual malady? Inability to connect to God. What are the common manifestations? Resentments, harms, guilt, fear, sex misconduct. What causes those manifestations of the spiritual malady? Instincts. What is the end result of the spiritual malady? This illusion that we're separated from God, this lie. 5, if left untreated, can the spiritual malady drive us back to drink? Oh, what do you think? Absolutely. What's the remedy? 4 through 9. And what happens with that remedy? The obsession gets removed. We'll look at it from this way too now. This is an interesting way to look at the spiritual malady. So alcohol has 3 layers. The first layer, the first inner layer is spiritual malady, right? The first layer is our body's craving for alcohol when we put it in our system. And that's this allergy right here. The second layer is this mental obsession, right? The third layer is the spiritual malady. Our spiritual malady assists at activating that first layer, that obsession, because it creates all those issues, all those problems that the obsession wants to hear and says, I know a different way. I know a better way. The obsession and the instincts are longtime lovers, but that way. They work hand in hand with each other. Oops. So it's the way I look at it, it's a twofold disease, right? And I was saying it, this activates the obsession, helps activate the mental obsession, and then the mental obsession helps, of course, activates the allergy. Twofold disease with a symptom of spiritual malady, a symptom, right? If we work on a spiritual malady, it goes away along with the obsession. How do you see, now do you see why resentments are poison? That's the best way to describe it. I hope you see that now by looking at that. You see why resentment is the number one offender and why they destroy more alcoholics than anything else. So we must find the strength within us to let this stuff go. But how? How can we loosen the grip, of this stuff, and so we can finally put it to bed and let go? And here's how we do it. 64. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. That's the beginning of it. That is a condition to achieving it's a first step in the condition of achieving a new way of life. Putting the stuff down on paper that causes our pain. And how deep you want to go is how deep do you want to be free. I want to leave with a thought, and something that's a deep thought, is one of the most interesting things about trees is in the really cold areas, some of you know about this cold areas, is that, in the fall, right before the cold weather comes in and approaches, they just let go of their leaves just effortlessly. All their leaves are gone. And the reason why they let go of their leaves, because they will not survive the cold winter, the cold air. If they hold on to them, the tree will die. And they don't say, I think I'm going to try this time to hold on and see if I survive. No, they let go of them effortlessly without thought. We are doing the same thing here in 4 for the exact same reason. So we can let things go and survive. So we can let them go effortlessly without fight. if we do not take that action, our odds are not good. So next week, we're going to have our first lesson on how to write proper inventory. So I'm going to stop the recording.